Connor Pearson, age 43, stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, gazing down at the sprawling trees of Central Park. The first pale light of morning skimmed the horizon, illuminating the Manhattan skyline like a polished crown. In this pristine apartment on the Upper East Side, every piece of furniture had its rightful place. Every surface shone as though no human hands had touched it. It was, in many ways, a perfect reflection of the man who lived there, disciplined, polished, and as emotionally impenetrable as the tower of glass he owned just a few blocks away. His 6'2" frame carried itself with the confidence of a corporate titan. A strict fitness regimen kept him lean, with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored suits. Connor's temples were dusted with grey, giving him a distinguished edge that his board members found reassuring. His angular jaw set off eyes the colour of steel, eyes that rarely betrayed any warmth or doubt. He was CEO of Pearson Investments, a wildly successful firm occupying the top floors of the imposing Pearson Tower in Midtown. To those around him, Connor was the epitome of achievement, a man who had amassed millions and won every corporate contest that mattered. Yet in the quiet spaces between his meticulously planned obligations, Connor felt a subtle hollowness he couldn't quite name. Morning after morning followed the same formula. He rose at 5, ran 5 miles on his treadmill overlooking the park, then showered, dressed in a crisp suit, and reviewed market reports while sipping black coffee. Today began no differently. Stepping into his private elevator, Connor descended from the penthouse to an awaiting Bentley. His longtime driver, Richard Morris, an astute 58-year-old former military man, opened the door with practiced precision. Connor slid inside wordlessly, the soft leather seats and tinted windows shielding him from the bustle of the city outside. Even from within this cocoon of luxury, he could feel the city's pulse as the Bentley merged into Manhattan's early traffic. Within half an hour, he was stepping onto the executive floor of Pearson Tower. Steel beams, glass walls, and a minimalist color scheme set the tone. Abstract art adorned the walls, acquired at exorbitant prices, yet devoid of personal significance. The morning's board meeting unfolded in a sleek conference room with a panoramic view of the city. Connor led the discussion with characteristic composure, dissecting numbers and offering incisive strategies for the next quarter. The directors admired his brilliance, but no one dared ask about the weariness that occasionally flickered behind his grey eyes. His ex-wife and current CFO, Vanessa Pearson, sat at the far end of the gleaming table. At 41, she retained the sculpted elegance that once captivated Connor's ambitions of a storybook marriage. Her blonde hair was impeccably styled, and her cool blue eyes conveyed unyielding resolve. Perfectly manicured fingernails tapped rhythmically on the tabletop whenever she disagreed with his points. Their relationship now was a strictly professional dance, albeit one charged with unspoken tension. When the meeting ended, she pulled him aside. "Connor," she said in a low, taut voice, "I need your confirmation on the trip to Tokyo. The investors won't wait, and your presence is mandatory." He paused, gaze fixed on the cityscape beyond the glass. A sharp twinge across his chest made him swallow hard. Lately, moments of discomfort had crept into his days, though he always brushed them aside. "We'll see. Let's finalize next week," he responded curtly, surprising even himself. He was the man who never delayed a deal, yet a stirring sense of unease rippled through him. Vanessa lifted an eyebrow, but kept her face impassive. "Fine. Don't keep them waiting too long." That evening, back in his penthouse, Connor moved as if on autopilot, discarding his suit jacket and loosening his tie. Outside, skyscrapers glowed against the deepening sky. He poured himself a glass of water, wandered to a sleek side table, and opened a drawer that remained locked most of the time. Inside lay a folder containing the photographs from his wedding day, taken 7 years ago. A lifetime, it seemed. He rarely acknowledged it, almost never glanced at the images. Yet tonight, with that unfamiliar ache still lingering in his chest, Connor found himself carefully lifting the folder's edge, as though drawn by a force he couldn't name. His gaze lingered on the corner of a single photo before he let the folder fall shut again. He closed the drawer and exhaled slowly, unsure why emptiness gnawed at him so fiercely, yet determined to ignore it for just a little longer. Connor's morning routine rarely deviated, but on this day, an unexpected tide of congestion snarled the streets of Midtown. Richard maneuvered the Bentley through the maze of honking taxis and frustrated commuters. The city had a habit of throwing curveballs when least expected, and Connor usually brushed them off, retaining the poised detachment that had served him so well in corporate life. Yet each stalled moment in the back seat heightened his irritation. He glanced at his watch, a silent admonition that valuable minutes were slipping away. Leaning forward, he addressed Richard. "Is there a side street we can take?" Richard shook his head slightly. "Fifth Avenue is all jammed up, sir. Some construction project, apparently. We'll inch along." Connor sank back, letting out a slow breath. Ordinarily, he would bury himself in emails or financial statements. But something about the day felt off. The tension that had tightened his chest yesterday still lingered. His eyes swept over the familiar storefronts as they crawled forward, each moment intensifying his impatience. Suddenly, amid the shuffle of pedestrians on the sidewalk, he noticed 2 small figures. They were twin boys, no older than 9, standing beside a battered folding table. A handwritten sign in childlike letters read, "Please help us save our mom." Boxes of homemade brownies lay in neat rows, but few passers-by stopped to look. The boys had tousled brown hair and matching jackets that appeared a size too large. One boy, perhaps the more outspoken of the two, called out to anyone who walked by, while the other held the sign and scanned faces with a determined gaze. Connor felt a tug inside his chest, one that had nothing to do with the traffic or his stressful schedule. He couldn't recall the last time such a sight had truly registered in his mind. Manhattan was a tapestry of people hustling, begging, or promoting some cause, and he had learned to tune out most of it. Yet these boys, identical and resolute, caught his eye in a way he couldn't ignore. His heart skipped. "Stop here, Richard," he said abruptly. The driver hesitated. "Sir, we're in a no parking zone." "Then double park. Just stop." The Bentley halted near a hydrant. Horns blared behind them, and a traffic officer cast a suspicious glare. But Connor pushed open the door. A gust of cool autumn air brushed his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk in his immaculate suit. He realized how out of place he must look next to the scruffy table and the hand-scribbled sign. The boys gawked at him with wide eyes. The talkative twin lifted a foil-wrapped brownie. "Would you like to buy one, mister?" he asked, voice trembling with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Connor caught a glimpse of the sign again. "Please help us save our mom." And an unwelcome warmth spread through him. Compassion was not a sensation he entertained often. This felt too raw, too personal. He glanced at his polished watch and then at the children's earnest faces. Time and traffic no longer seemed to matter. "I'll buy them," he found himself saying. The quieter twin nodded, but pointed to the sign as though words were failing him. "Our mom. She's sick, and—" he began softly. Connor swallowed. "How much for all of them?" The boys exchanged stunned glances. "All of them? We have at least 4 dozen, stammered the talkative one, whose name tag, cut from a piece of construction paper, read Thomas. Connor nodded. "Yes, all." He reached for his wallet. "Thomas, is it? And your brother?" "Timothy." whispered the quieter boy. Beneath their wide eyes, Connor saw fatigue and worry that no child should bear. Without hesitation, he handed over several crisp bills, far more than the brownies were worth. But money felt like the smallest part of what was unfolding. The question that echoed in his mind was simpler. Who was their mother, and why was she in such dire need? Before he could walk away, Connor heard himself say, "I'd like to help. If there's more to this than just buying brownies, please, let me know." The traffic moved again, horns honked, and Richard looked ready to intervene. But Connor stood rooted beside the boys, sensing that his carefully controlled life had just hit an irreversible turning point. A chilly breeze swept along the sidewalk, rustling the edges of the boys' makeshift sign. Thomas, the more vocal twin, tightened his grip on the poster board, while Timothy busied himself packing leftover brownies into a dented aluminum tray. Connor Pearson, feeling uncharacteristically uncertain, lingered near the table. He'd already purchased their entire stock, yet found himself unable to simply disappear back into his plush, carefully guarded life. Thomas was the first to break the awkward silence. "Mr. Thank you for buying everything." "We can pay for some of Mom's medicine now," he said, forcing a brave smile. Timothy nodded, though his expression stayed anxious. Connor felt a pang of discomfort, an unfamiliar sympathy gnawing at the edges of his practiced detachment. "Is your mother at home?" he asked, aware that the question made him sound invasive. Normally, he would have written a check or delegated someone else to handle matters like these. Yet the sight of these twins, so young and earnest, had triggered a protective urge he could neither dismiss nor fully understand. Timothy answered softly, "Yeah, she's at home. We don't want her to worry about us missing school, but we had to try something, because she needs a special surgery soon," and his voice trailed off, eyes darting around as though uncertain he should reveal more. Connor inhaled, feeling a swirl of conflicting impulses. His polished executive mind told him to walk away, to write a generous donation, and to let city social services handle such hardships. But another part of him, a long-silenced instinct, rebelled at that detachment. He'd seen something in their eyes that made him suspect these boys were out of options. He cleared his throat. Well, I don't want to intrude, but I could help in other ways. Perhaps we could..." He caught himself, unsure how to proceed. This was entirely new territory. He glanced at his waiting Bentley, feeling the magnetic pull of his old, predictable life. Thomas lifted the sign, folding it in half. "We live nearby," he offered tentatively, looking to Timothy for agreement. "If you really want to know more, maybe you could meet our mom. She's been real tired lately, so if you visit, she might not be up for a long talk." Richard, Connor's driver, cleared his throat politely from behind. "Sir," he murmured, "we're causing a bit of a scene." Indeed, a few curious pedestrians had begun to stare, wondering why a tall, silver-haired man in a bespoke suit was standing next to two kids in worn-out sneakers and an old folding table. Connor recognized the intrusion of reality, but felt compelled to follow through. "Let me drop these brownies in the car," he said, lifting the trays carefully, "and then we'll walk together." "If that's all right." The boys exchanged a quick look of relief. Timothy gave a small nod. "That's okay, thank you." Connor passed the trays to Richard, ignoring his driver's baffled expression. He then locked eyes with the twins, a rare softness in his normally stoic gaze. "Lead the way." Walking a few blocks through the bustling Manhattan streets with Thomas and Timothy brought Connor more stares, though he hardly noticed. He was too focused on the children's hushed conversation, picking up fragments about their mother's health, overdue bills, and a father who was nowhere in the picture. The details sent waves of unease through him. At one point, Thomas asked, Did you always want to be so rich? The boy's tone was earnest, not accusatory. Connor hesitated, caught off guard. I suppose I set certain goals when I was younger, and I never stopped. The response felt hollow, even to his own ears. Timothy kicked at a loose pebble. Does being rich help when you're sick? The question sliced deeper than expected. Connor felt a flicker of memory, a quiet hospital room years ago, when he'd wrestled with his own health issues, ignoring them in favor of spreadsheets. He swallowed and muttered, "Sometimes, but not always." They reached a modest apartment building, paint peeling near the entrance. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and damp carpet. Thomas led them to the elevator, pressing a button that stuck briefly before lighting up. Connor's heart pounded with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He was crossing a threshold into a reality far removed from his own, the kind of world he had spent years insulating himself from with money, power, and polished surfaces. As the elevator doors opened, Timothy turned to him and said, voice trembling, "We really hope you can help, mister. She's all we have." Standing in the dimly lit corridor, Connor realized that for the first time in years, he couldn't predict the next step in his meticulously ordered life. The apartment was modest, 2 small bedrooms, a narrow living area, and a kitchenette. Yet it felt unexpectedly welcoming. Faded photographs lined the walls, capturing sunlit faces and joyful moments. A single lamp cast a warm glow across a well-worn couch. The space might have been cramped compared to Connor's penthouse, but it exuded an undeniable sense of home. Amy Foster, a slender woman of 40, lay propped against a few pillows on that couch. Long brown hair framed her pale face, strands slightly disheveled from rest. Although her skin looked drawn from fatigue, her greenish eyes still held a soft spark. As Connor stepped in, her lips parted in a faint, polite smile. She didn't seem fully aware of who was visiting. "Mom," Timothy said gently, taking her hand. "This is the man who helped us with the brownies." Amy stirred, trying to sit upright. "Hi," she managed, voice quiet but gracious. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. I've been under the weather." "Connor," he replied, clearing his throat. He felt strangely self-conscious in his tailored suit amid the everyday chaos of children's shoes, blankets, and half-finished drawings strewn around. "Connor Pearson." She repeated the name as though turning it over in her mind. If it registered, she gave no sign. Instead, she motioned for him to take the worn armchair nearby. "Thank you for helping my boys," Amy said softly, pressing a hand to her chest as if fighting a wave of discomfort. "They've been so worried about me, more than they should have to." Connor nodded, noticing a portable oxygen tank in the corner and a cluster of medical papers on a small table. He set his briefcase aside, feeling out of place, yet compelled to stay. "They're resourceful kids. You must be proud." Amy's eyes flickered with maternal pride. "I am." "They're good boys," she exhaled wearily. "They shouldn't have to be out there selling brownies, but the insurance barely covers my daily meds, let alone a specialized surgery." Thomas interjected, "Mom's a photographer, a really good one. She used to do weddings and portraits and stuff until—" He trailed off, looking at Connor as though expecting him to solve the unspoken problem. Connor glanced at the photos on the wall. Indeed, they were beautiful shots, some black and white, others in vibrant color, capturing small human details that felt incredibly alive. A wedding party by a lakeside, a couple exchanging rings beneath fairy lights. Something nagged at him. It wasn't just the artistry. There was a familiarity in the angles, the style. Could it be? He shook off the thought. "What is your condition, if I may ask?" The question came out more clinical than he intended. Amy folded her hands in her lap. "It's a rare cardiac issue. I need a specific procedure that isn't fully covered by insurance. It's considered experimental in some places." She paused, eyes lowered. "I did a lot of wedding photography a few years back. I might have shot some events for your acquaintances, Mr. Pearson. That's how we managed for a while, but I just can't keep up anymore." Connor shifted, noticing for the first time that her camera equipment, though well-maintained, was visibly outdated. The name Foster Photography was stenciled on a battered camera bag. Then he spotted a framed photograph leaning against the wall. Though it was partially obscured by a blanket, the scene looked oddly familiar. A groom with silver-tinged hair standing next to a tall blonde bride in a lavish ballroom. A jolt of recognition flared. He felt the tension in his chest return, this time not entirely physical. Could this woman have been the photographer at his own failed wedding? He wasn't sure. 7 years had passed since that day. He resisted the urge to lift the blanket and check. Before he could speak, footsteps sounded from the hallway. A kindly older neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, popped in, her small frame topped by white hair in a tight bun. She eyed Connor's expensive suit with open suspicion. "Everything all right here, Amy?" Amy nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Jenkins. This is Connor. He's helping." Turning to Connor, she explained, "Mrs. Jenkins looks after the boys when I'm at the hospital." "She's been like family." Connor offered a polite greeting, while the neighbor kept a watchful eye. The entire scene felt surreal, an intimate family drama playing out in a cramped living room, with him, an outsider, suddenly thrust into the center. A sudden flutter of panic crossed Amy's face. She pressed a hand to her chest. The color drained from her cheeks. Timothy rushed over, alarmed, while Thomas ran to get a glass of water. Connor stood helplessly, heart pounding. In that moment, he realized the gravity of Amy's condition, far more severe than he'd comprehended. The question now was whether he'd simply write a check and walk away, or become involved in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be in years. Connor found himself sitting in a cramped waiting area at one of Manhattan's public hospitals the next morning, a place he'd never imagined he would visit voluntarily. The corridor smelled of antiseptic, and chairs were filled with patients awaiting their names to be called. He'd driven Amy, Thomas, and Timothy here in his Bentley, an incongruous sight in front of the aging hospital entrance. Rachel Coleman, his efficient personal assistant, had helped arrange the appointment, leveraging every connection Connor had to secure an immediate consult with Amy's current cardiologist, Dr. Michael Chen. The doctor, a composed man in his early 50s with a gentle bedside manner, explained Amy's test results in straightforward terms. Her condition is advanced, and standard treatments aren't controlling it effectively. The specialized surgery we discussed is her best chance. However, insurance complications, he hesitated, glancing at Connor's expensive attire, often stand in the way. I'm afraid time is of the essence. Connor nodded grimly. What about private hospitals or specialists outside New York? Dr. Chen placed Amy's file on the desk. She needs an experimental procedure approved in only a few high-level cardiac research centers. The top surgeon for this kind of operation is Dr. James Harrison, who works primarily at a private facility uptown. His success rates are impressive, but so are his fees. Insurance rarely covers a procedure considered innovative. Amy, seated beside Connor, wore her exhaustion plainly, though she tried to appear composed. I've looked into Dr. Harrison before, she said softly. The waiting list is enormous, and even if I could get in, I couldn't pay for it. I'm grateful for your help, Mr. Pearson, but let's be realistic. I can't ask you to... Connor held up a hand gently. Don't worry about the financials. I'll figure something out. The calm certainty in his own voice surprised him. Perhaps it was the memory of those twins selling brownies, or the weight of seeing Amy nearly collapse in front of him. Something compelled him to act, pushing aside every rational voice in his head, warning him that this was none of his business. Dr. Chen cleared his throat. "Well, if that's your decision, I can forward her files to Dr. Harrison's office. It might expedite the process." Connor reached for his phone. "Please do." A short while later, they gathered outside Dr. Chen's office. Amy stood close to the twins, trying to mask her worry. The moment felt tense, suspended, until Connor mustered a soft reassurance. "I've got some contacts. Let me see what I can arrange." He paused, noticing that Timothy was staring at him intently. Thomas piped up, "Why are you doing this for us?" His tone carried only curiosity, not suspicion. Connor ruffled a hand through his neatly groomed hair. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted, "but I can't walk away now." When the group returned to the hospital lobby, Connor spotted Rachel waiting in a corner, discreet but alert. She wore a tailored grey pantsuit and held a leather portfolio. The moment she saw him, she approached with a purposeful stride, her voice low. "I've scheduled a call with Dr. James Harrison's coordinator. They can see Ms. Foster for an assessment by next week. But Connor, I also have to remind you, Vanessa called 3 times this morning about your cancelled trip. The board is concerned about the timeline for the upcoming merger." A flicker of annoyance, or perhaps guilt, flashed across his face. He wondered how he'd explain all this to Vanessa, who never took kindly to sudden deviations in carefully laid business plans. "Let them know I'll handle it," he said, forcing a confidence he didn't fully feel. Rachel gave a tight nod. She glanced at Amy and the twins with subdued empathy, as though recognizing the profound shift in her boss's behavior, but unwilling to pry. "I'll confirm the appointment with Dr. Harrison." By the time they reached the parking lot, Connor insisted on driving them back to the apartment. Amy, frail but still proud, hesitated. "You've done too much already." He shook his head. "I can do more." The ride was quiet, except for occasional whispers from the back seat. When the Bentley pulled up to their curb, Amy turned to Connor, her voice quivering. "I don't know if you remember, but I once photographed a wedding at a place called the Lakeside Pavilion. It was years ago. Something about you feels familiar." Connor's stomach tightened. He knew that name. His own wedding had been at the Lakeside Pavilion. Had she been behind the camera then, capturing moments of a union that disintegrated not long after? He steeled himself, giving a faint nod. "Maybe it's just Manhattan," he said. "Small world." Amy didn't press further, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She stepped onto the sidewalk with the twins, turning back to offer a grateful half-smile. "I can't thank you enough." Connor watched them disappear into the aging brick building. For the first time in years, he sensed that his wealth and power might serve a purpose beyond mere boardroom victories. Yet along with that determination came a ripple of apprehension, because this choice, born of compassion, threatened to unearth the past he'd spent so long burying. He exhaled, pulling the car door shut, ready to make the calls that might give Amy a chance at life and complicate his own far more than he could imagine. Connor Pearson sat in the waiting area of the prestigious Manhattan Cardiac Institute, tapping his polished shoes against the spotless floor. The walls around him were adorned with tasteful artwork, and the hush of serious business filled the corridors. He had spent the morning expediting paperwork for Amy Foster's initial consultation with Dr. James Harrison, the renowned heart surgeon who had once saved Connor's own life. Yet the butterflies in his stomach felt stronger than any pressure he'd faced in a boardroom. At exactly 10 in the morning, a nurse in lilac scrubs stepped out. "Miss Foster," she called, scanning the faces in the immaculate waiting room. Amy rose slowly, still pale from fatigue. Thomas and Timothy hovered protectively on either side. Connor motioned for them to follow him down the gleaming hallway toward Dr. Harrison's private suite. Entering a spacious consultation room, they found Dr. Harrison standing by a tall window. He was a stately man of 65, with white hair neatly combed back and an air of calm authority that belied his legendary reputation. Upon seeing Connor, his lined face softened into a smile of recognition. "Mr. Pearson," he greeted, extending a hand. "It's been a while." Connor inclined his head. "It has, Doctor." He then gestured to Amy and the twins. "These are the Fosters. Amy's the patient I mentioned. Doctor." Harrison turned his piercing blue gaze on Amy, giving the impression he saw straight through to her weakened heart. "I've reviewed the initial test results from Dr. Chen," he said, his tone both gentle and resolute. "Your condition requires a specialized procedure I've been perfecting over the last few years. The good news is that you're still a candidate. The challenge is navigating the insurance barriers and the hospital administration's approval." Amy twisted her fingers nervously, anxiety evident on her face. Thomas and Timothy exchanged worried glances. Connor, sensing the tension, cleared his throat. "I'll take care of any financial or administrative hurdles," he promised. "I understand these operations can be costly. I'm prepared." Dr. Harrison studied Connor a moment, recalling the younger man he'd treated years back, an ambitious executive who'd seemed incapable of slowing down. "I'm aware of your resources, Mr. Pearson, but I'll be honest, even money can't cut through all the red tape overnight. The hospital board is cautious about experimental procedures, no matter who foots the bill." A flicker of frustration crossed Connor's grey eyes. He'd never liked hearing no, especially when it felt like time was slipping away. "Then we'll make our case," he said evenly. "Whatever it takes." Satisfied by Connor's determination, Dr. Harrison turned to Amy. "Before we schedule anything, I need to run my own evaluations. We'll start with an echocardiogram, a stress test, although a modified one, given your current state, and some advanced imaging. If these confirm my suspicions, I'll recommend the surgery." "Are you comfortable proceeding?" Amy nodded, her voice tremulous. "Yes, of course. She paused, glancing at Connor. "I don't want to become a burden." Connor placed a hand gently on the back of one of the chairs, reluctant to overstep boundaries but unable to hide his concern. "This is about your health, Amy. Let's do what needs doing." Thomas, the more outspoken twin, squared his small shoulders. "We'll help, Mum. Whatever we have to do." Timothy managed a quiet smile, though worry lined his young face. Dr. Harrison gave them a reassuring nod. "Your mother is in good hands. Let's get started." Over the next few hours, Amy underwent a battery of preliminary tests. Connor sat with the boys in a softly lit waiting room decorated with potted ferns and tasteful abstract art. Whenever a nurse called Amy's name, Dr. Harrison himself appeared to escort her to the next station, a sign of the personalized care he offered. Between tests, Dr. Harrison pulled Connor aside. "She seems fragile, but her spirit is strong. Reminds me of someone else I know." He paused, then continued more quietly. "Don't let guilt drive your decisions, Connor. I can see something bigger is at stake." Connor's jaw tensed. He nodded but offered no explanation. It was enough that Dr. Harrison had recognized the shift in him, no longer simply a businessman, but a man grappling with a life he'd neglected. Later that week, Connor returned to Amy's apartment with cautious optimism. He carried a slim folder of medical papers he'd just received from Dr. Harrison's office. After 3 days of tests, the results were in. Amy's case was serious but treatable, provided they moved fast. He stood in the hall outside her apartment, hesitating before knocking. The battered door contrasted sharply with his impeccable suit, reminding him how different their worlds were. Finally, he rapped gently. It was Timothy who answered, face lighting up the instant he recognized Connor. "Hey, mister, Mum's resting, but you can come in," the boy said, stepping aside. Inside, Thomas was putting away groceries they'd likely carried up themselves, while Amy sipped tea at the small kitchenette table. Connor offered her a polite nod. "I've got some important updates," he said, placing the folder on the table. The kitchen was awash in the golden light of late afternoon, illuminating the simple but homey surroundings. Amy looked up, setting her mug down. Do we have any answers?" Her voice trembled with equal parts hope and dread. Connor sat across from her, exhaling slowly. "Yes, Dr. Harrison says you're a candidate for his procedure. The hospital board still needs to approve the final plan. There are forms to sign, insurance appeals to negotiate, but he's hopeful. If all goes well, you could be scheduled for surgery in a matter of weeks." Relief flashed across her tired features, and for a moment she looked like a different person, someone less weighed down by worry. Thomas dropped the grocery bag and blurted, "That means Mom can get better, right?" "It means we have a shot," Connor affirmed. "A real one." Timothy sidled closer, quiet tears gathering in his eyes. His relief was palpable, though overshadowed by lingering fear. Connor's chest tightened in response. He felt an urgent protectiveness toward these boys, an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. Amy reached for the folder. I don't know how to thank you, Connor. You've done so much." Before he could respond, the door buzzed, announcing another visitor. Connor's spine stiffened when he heard a familiar voice in the corridor. Vanessa. She strode in without waiting for an invitation, clutching a glossy company binder. Thomas and Timothy exchanged uncertain looks as she surveyed the apartment with barely disguised distaste. "Connor," she said, her tone sharp, "I've been trying to reach you." Turning pointedly to Amy, she forced a brittle smile. "So you're the woman occupying all of his time?" Amy instinctively clutched the folder tighter, feeling the sudden chill in the air. Connor stood, voice clipped. "Vanessa, this isn't a good time." She ignored him, stepping around the small living room as though assessing it for a real estate deal. "The merger with Fujita Corp is at risk because the CEO of Pearson Investments is distracted." Her gaze swept over the modest furnishings, then landed on Connor. "I came here to see what's so critical that it justifies cancelling our Tokyo meetings and leaving the board in disarray." Connor's jaw flexed. He considered ushering her out, but Amy rose shakily, not wanting conflict under her roof. "Ms. Pearson, I'm sorry if Connor's business has been—" Vanessa cut her off with a cold laugh. "Ms. Foster, is it? Please, don't apologize. I'm sure none of this is your fault." She fixed Connor with an accusing glare. "But I can't say the same for him." Timothy and Thomas pressed closer to their mother, sensing the tension. Connor moved to stand between them and Vanessa, voice low. "Vanessa, whatever issues you have with me, let's discuss them outside." Vanessa shrugged, her manicured fingernails tapping against the binder. "Fine, but remember this. The board is expecting accountability. They want you at the negotiating table, not playing nurse." She raised an eyebrow, eyes flicking to Amy. "No offense." Amy's cheeks burned, and Connor could see she was trying to maintain dignity despite the hurt. Vanessa's intrusion reminded him that money and power had always given him distance from everyday struggles, and now they threatened the very people he was trying to protect. Once Vanessa swept out, the tension lingered like a toxic cloud. Connor turned to Amy, his voice softer. "I'm sorry about that. She had no right." Amy managed a faint smile. "She's your ex-wife, right? She seems—" passionate about her work. Timothy pulled at Connor's sleeve. "You're not leaving us, right?" Connor knelt down, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, I'm not. This news about your mom's surgery, it changes everything. We have a path. I'm not backing out now." Looking up, he met Amy's gaze. He could see the question in her eyes. How far was he willing to go, and at what cost? For the first time, Connor felt an unshakable certainty that some choices were bigger than profit margins. 2 days later, Connor found himself juggling both worlds: corporate demands at Pearson Tower and the critical progress of Amy's medical arrangements. In the morning, he chaired a finance meeting where the conversation centered on dollars, projected returns, and the looming Fujita Corp merger. By afternoon, he was back at the Manhattan Cardiac Institute, standing with Amy as Dr. Harrison explained the next steps. During one of these commutes between the two worlds, slipping from the tinted windows of his Bentley into the hospital's main entrance, Connor realized he could no longer keep his life in neat compartments. His phone buzzed ceaselessly. One moment, a board member demanding an urgent call. The next, Dr. Harrison's office texting updates about test results. The dissonance only deepened, but so did his resolve. On a crisp Wednesday afternoon, after a tense board discussion, Connor arrived at the hospital in time for Amy's follow-up consultation. The boys were in school, so Amy sat alone in the waiting area, flipping through a magazine without really reading it. She looked up as Connor approached, a tired smile playing on her lips. "Long day?" she asked, noticing the lines of stress around his eyes. He sank into the seat next to her. "You could say that, but I'm here now. How did your labs go?" Amy brushed a strand of hair from her face. "We're still waiting on final numbers, but Dr. Harrison says we can't delay the surgery much longer." Her voice shook slightly. "I know the paperwork is still pending approval," Connor exhaled, wishing he could snap his fingers to speed things along. "I've spoken to Dr. Harrison's administrative team. They're optimistic we'll get the green light." He tried to offer a reassuring smile. "I just might have to grease a few wheels." A flicker of tension passed over Amy's face. "I don't want you compromising." He cut her off gently. "Stop. This is your life. There's no compromise." "I'm all in." Amy swallowed hard, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Before she could respond, the nurse called her back for additional imaging. Connor waited in the hall, leaning against a pale blue wall, checking emails on his phone. He'd responded to half a dozen urgent business messages when he noticed a new text from his longtime driver, Richard, Ms. Vanessa left messages again. Urgent. A wave of weariness washed over him. Vanessa had become more aggressive since her unannounced visit to Amy's apartment. She claimed it was about the merger, but Connor knew she was stung by his sudden dedication to someone else's crisis, especially after all the silent tension lingering from their divorce. He slid his phone back into his pocket as Amy emerged from the imaging suite, looking drained. Wordlessly, he offered his arm for support. She gratefully accepted, leaning on him as they walked toward the exit. The first chill of evening settled over the city, and streetlights flickered to life. In the parking lot, Dr. Harrison caught up with them, his white coat flapping in the breeze. "Amy, everything looks consistent with our previous findings. I'll press for a surgery date in the next week or two. Connor, if I can have a word." Amy paused by the Bentley. "Sure. I'll wait here." She gave them both a gentle nod, her eyes lingering on Connor's face. Dr. Harrison steered Connor aside, his expression serious. "Hospital administrators are supportive, but they're requesting more documentation. Once we finalize the date, I'll need you both fully committed. This is going to be intense, especially if complications arise." Connor nodded without hesitation. "I understand, Doctor. Whatever it takes. The older man searched Connor's face. Good. And are you ready for what might come after? Her recovery will be long, and it's not just money. She'll need emotional support, everyday help. You can't just parachute in, pay the bills, and vanish. A pang of recognition coursed through Connor. Dr. Harrison had known him during his own post-surgery days, back when he'd refused visitors, refused vulnerability, burying himself in spreadsheets instead of facing a fractured marriage. Now he swallowed the lump in his throat. I won't walk away this time, I promise. Satisfied, Dr. Harrison patted him on the shoulder before returning inside. Connor rejoined Amy, who stood looking slightly adrift. He opened the car door, a silent gesture that he was there for her. As she settled into the Bentley's seat, Connor understood that the collision of his corporate world and Amy's struggle was irreversible, and that he was done trying to keep them separate. During the intense week of preoperative exams that followed, Connor found himself spending almost every spare moment at the Manhattan Cardiac Institute. The staff began to recognize him. This tall man in crisp suits, hovering in the corridors or waiting by the vending machines with uneasy patience. He was a stark contrast to the typical image of a harried relative in worn jeans, yet he shared the same anxious heartbeat whenever Amy disappeared behind stainless steel doors. Amy was subjected to a variety of scans, blood draws, and specialized cardiac tests that sometimes required sedation. During these pockets of waiting, Connor and the twins often found themselves in sterile, fluorescent-lit hallways, trying to lighten the mood with jokes or talk about anything but medical procedures. It was in these stretches of forced idleness that fragments of deeper connection began to surface. One late afternoon, while Amy was undergoing an extended echocardiogram, Thomas and Timothy convinced Connor to join them at the hospital cafe. A row of vending machines hummed softly, and plastic tables were scattered under harsh overhead lights. The boys each grabbed a soda, and Connor settled for a black coffee he barely tasted. Thomas took a careful sip before asking, "How come you know so much about these doctors and tests, Mr. Pearson?" Connor hesitated. The question opened a door into a part of himself he rarely revisited. I had heart trouble once," he admitted, staring down into his coffee. "Several years ago, Dr. Harrison performed my surgery." Timothy's eyes widened. "But you're okay now?" Connor forced a small smile. "Yes, physically, but it changed me in ways I'm only now understanding. I focused so hard on getting back to work that He paused, unsure how to translate the complexity of adult regret into language for a 9-year-old. The moment hung, brimming with unspoken confessions. Timothy's gaze softened. "Is that why you're helping Mom?" Connor let out a slow breath. "Maybe. I know how scary it can be. And your mom, she deserves every chance." A lull followed as the twins processed his words. Then, Thomas fiddled with his soda can. "You know, Mom said she recognized you from somewhere even before you told us about your surgery. She used to photograph big fancy weddings and events." He glanced at Connor. "Did she take pictures of you before?" Connor's heart pounded. The memory of his failed wedding came rushing back, Vanessa's cold stares, the half-smiles in the photos, the sense he was playing a role in someone else's fairy tale. "It's possible," he acknowledged, voice quiet. "Your mom mentioned a place called Lakeside Pavilion. That's where He trailed off, unwilling to plunge the boys into the messy details of a broken marriage. Timothy frowned, trying to piece it together. "So, did she photograph your wedding or something?" Connor met his eyes. "Yes, I think she did. I only realized it after seeing her camera bag at your apartment. She probably doesn't remember all the faces, but I was there." He glanced at his phone, conscious that the test might be done soon. "Let's keep it simple for now. It might bring back tough memories for your mom, too." When Amy finally rejoined them, Looking groggy, she saw the twins sipping their sodas and Connor quiet by their side. In her eyes, there was relief and vulnerability mingled, a silent question she'd been wanting to ask. He guided her gently back upstairs to speak with Dr. Harrison about the results. Later that evening, after the hospital had quieted down, Connor and Amy found themselves walking the corridors alone. Softly glowing exit signs lit their path. "I remember you now," Amy said gently, breaking the silence. "You were the groom at that wedding I photographed, right? The Pearson family event. It was a big deal." Connor nodded, throat tight. "It was 7 years ago, but feels like a lifetime." Amy stopped, pressing a hand to the wall for support. "Why didn't you say anything before?" He hesitated. "I wasn't sure how you'd react. That wedding didn't end well. I thought maybe you'd remember me as that unhappy groom," he added with a trace of rueful humor. Amy's face softened, empathy flickering in her eyes. "It's strange, the memories I have. You looked lonely, even on your own wedding day," she exhaled, her breath shaky. "I guess some of us hide pain too well." They walked on in silence, footsteps echoing. Both felt the weight of regrets and second chances. Connor realized their shared past, once a source of discomfort, was now a catalyst for deeper understanding. He suspected that acknowledging these truths was only the first step in forging a bond neither had planned, but both were beginning to cherish. With Amy's test results mostly confirming Dr. Harrison's plan, the hospital scheduled several more days of preparatory checkups. Meanwhile, Connor found himself increasingly enmeshed in the foster household's routines. What began as rides to and from the hospital expanded to after-school pickup for the twins, helping them with homework and even assisting with simple household chores, though he did so clumsily. One evening, the mouth-watering scent of spaghetti sauce filled the cramped kitchen as Connor attempted to stir a pot while Thomas hovered, giving instructions. Timothy set the table, carefully arranging mismatched plates and cups. Amy, still worn out from tests, rested on the living room couch but smiled at the domestic tableau unfolding. "You sure you know how to cook, Mr. Pearson?" Timothy teased, arching a brow. Connor gave a sheepish grin. "I wouldn't call myself a chef, but I can handle pasta. Just tell me if it starts to burn." Thomas peered into the pot. "Watch that sauce. Mom likes extra basil." Connor dutifully added a sprinkle, stirring with focused determination. Normally, his evenings would be spent reviewing financial reports or attending lavish networking events. But here he was, stirring homemade sauce in a cozy apartment that smelled of garlic, tomatoes, and budding affection. He realized with a tiny jolt of surprise that he felt more at ease than he ever had in his penthouse. After dinner, Amy insisted on helping with the dishes, despite Connor's protests. So he pivoted to the twins, guiding them through their math homework. Timothy had a knack for creative writing, but struggled with fractions, while Thomas was the reverse. Quick with numbers, shy about composing paragraphs. "Wait," Thomas said. "If 3/4 times 2 is 112, how does that help with the word problem about brownies?" Connor chuckled. "Well, if you had 3/4 of a pan of brownies and you baked 2 pans, that means—" He paused. The mention of brownies stirred a memory of that day he first saw them on the street. It felt both distant and impossibly recent. Amy, drying dishes in the kitchen, caught the wistful look on his face. Her voice called gently, "Everything okay there?" He nodded, blinking away the thought. "Yep, we're just doing brownie math." She smiled softly, and for a moment their gazes locked across the room, an unspoken acknowledgement of how much had changed since those brownies and that hand-lettered sign. Later, as bedtime approached, Timothy pulled Connor aside, leading him to a narrow hallway lined with framed photos. "We want to show you something." Thomas joined, rummaging through a small cabinet until he produced a photo album. Its cover bore the words "Family Portraits" in a child's handwriting. Inside were pictures of the twins as toddlers, their faces smeared with cake frosting. Amy in a hospital gown holding two newborns, a few scattered wedding shots she'd taken of other couples. Toward the back, Timothy had begun adding new pages, quick snaps he or Thomas had taken of Connor helping with groceries, or sitting with them at the hospital, or standing in the kitchen stirring pasta. Connor swallowed hard, emotion rising in his throat. "I didn't realize you were taking these." Thomas shrugged. "We like pictures, and Mom says pictures show how people grow." Timothy's eyes shone. "Since you started helping, we've changed." "You've changed too, right?" Connor couldn't deny it. He felt it in every subtle shift of his daily priorities, every moment he lingered over decisions that once seemed automatic. He turned another page to see a candid shot of him, mid-laugh, stirring tomato sauce. The expression on his own face startled him. He looked genuinely happy, almost carefree. Amy's voice drifted from behind them. "They're good at capturing moments," she said softly, stepping closer. She rested a hand on Timothy's shoulder. "I used to believe a camera could freeze time. Let us hold on to the good stuff a little longer." Connor glanced between them, heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper, something he couldn't quite name. "You're all teaching me," he murmured, "that not every snapshot is about perfection. Sometimes it's just about preserving a feeling." Amy's lips curved into a tender smile. "Exactly." The moment was interrupted by Connor's phone buzzing on the coffee table, a harsh reminder of another life that demanded his attention. He let it go to voicemail, unwilling to break the spell. Tonight, at least, he wanted to be fully present in this cramped apartment brimming with warmth, homework, and hope. A short while later, as the twins drifted off to bed, Connor slipped out. In the silent hallway, he realized he was carrying a gentle sense of peace and belonging that his corporate empire had never provided. He couldn't know what storms awaited him, especially with Vanessa lurking, but as he headed home, he understood that he was no longer just a benefactor. He was becoming part of their family portrait in ways even he couldn't yet define. Connor had just finished a grueling strategy session at Pearson Tower when he noticed Rachel, his assistant, hovering near the glass walls of his office. She wore a concerned expression. "Sir," she murmured, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Vanessa is here to see you. She didn't have an appointment, but she insists it's urgent." Connor's jaw set. He could guess the topic. Some new development in the merger, or perhaps more meddling in his personal affairs. "Send her in," he said, inhaling slowly. Vanessa swept into the room, chin held high. Her blonde hair was meticulously styled, and her tailored suit projected an air of authority. She looked like the consummate CFO, but Connor knew that behind that controlled exterior, old emotions seethed. "Connor," she began crisply, "we need to talk." He folded his arms, standing behind his sleek glass desk. "I gathered as much. What's the crisis this time?" Her blue eyes narrowed. "I've just concluded meetings with our potential Japanese partners. They're skittish. Your repeated absences and last-minute changes to the itinerary are sending the wrong signals. They question your commitment." Connor's throat tightened with annoyance. "I've already spoken with Gregory Winters. He's covering for me until I can focus again. I told you I'm dealing with a personal matter." Vanessa's voice took on a scathing edge. "Oh, I know. I've seen the hospital bills, the resource reallocation, and I have a stack of photos of you playing house with that woman and her children." She slapped a manila folder onto his desk, brimming with surveillance shots. "A little dramatic, don't you think?" Connor's pulse kicked up. "You hired someone to spy on me," He tried to keep his voice low, mindful that half the office was just a sheet of glass away. She shrugged, eyes flashing coldly. I had to figure out why the CEO of Pearson Investments was AWOL for days. Now I have my answer. You've replaced your corporate duties with babysitting. She paused, as if waiting for him to rise to her bait. Don't you see how dangerous this is? We're on the cusp of the biggest deal in the company's history, and you're off in some rundown apartment playing hero. A wave of anger surged through Connor, but deeper still was a protectiveness he'd never felt before. That rundown apartment houses a woman who needs life-saving surgery. She's the mother of 2 kids doing everything they can to help her survive. And I'm not playing anything, he growled, knuckles whitening on the edge of the desk. Vanessa's gaze flicked over him, her carefully manicured nails tapping the folder. You do realize I hold significant sway over the board, right? If they see these photos, interpret them as you, being unfit to lead, it could end your tenure. I wouldn't let that happen lightly, but you're leaving me with few choices. Connor felt his stomach lurch. The company was his creation, his life's work, and losing control would be a massive blow. But the thought of abandoning Amy and the twins was unthinkable. You're crossing a line, Vanessa. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then pick a side, Connor. The board or this woman, because you can't have both. Not the way things are going. A knock sounded at the door, and Rachel poked her head in. She wore an apologetic look. I'm sorry, Mr. Pearson, but your conference call with the legal team is starting. Vanessa used the interruption to slip past him, pausing in the doorway. You know what needs to be done, she whispered. Don't make me the villain here. Then she was gone, heels clacking on the polished floor. Connor inhaled, trying to steady himself. The folder lay there, a silent threat. Outside, he could see staff bustling about, oblivious to the storm that had just raged in his office. On his desk phone, the conference line blinked impatiently. He had to choose, continue sacrificing everything to help Amy, or step back before Vanessa destroyed both his corporate legacy and the fragile hope he was building with a family in desperate need. As he exited his office to join the legal call, Connor felt his heart pounding with an intensity he hadn't experienced since his own medical emergency years ago. And he knew, with dawning certainty, that no matter what the board or Vanessa thought, turning his back on Amy and the twins was not an option. The next morning, Connor Pearson sat in his sleek office, head in his hands, listening to the muted hum of Manhattan traffic below. Outside the glass walls, members of the executive team bustled about, preparing for yet another round of high-stakes meetings. Normally, the pulse of corporate life energized him, but today it felt suffocating. His phone vibrated for the 3rd time in 15 minutes, flashing Vanessa's name on the screen. He let it buzz unanswered. With a slow exhale, he turned his attention to the folder in front of him, a day planner jammed with conflicting obligations. On one page, there was a note, Amy's final pre-op meeting, Tuesday at 10 a.m. On another, investor presentation, 10:30 a.m., boardroom. Both events demanded his presence. He couldn't be in 2 places at once, and rescheduling either would be a minefield. A light knock on the door broke his reverie. Rachel Coleman stepped in, her efficient manner laced with concern. Sir, the board is asking if you'll be present at the final strategy rehearsal for the merger. It's in 30 minutes. Connor raked a hand through his hair. I can't postpone Amy's meeting with Dr. Harrison. The entire surgical plan hinges on it. Rachel lowered her eyes, clearly torn. Understood, but Vanessa has everyone on edge. She's telling the board that your divided focus is putting the deal at risk. Connor closed his planner with a decisive thump. If I skip Amy's appointment, we might face delays or risk losing Dr. Harrison's narrow scheduling window. There has to be a way to manage both. Rachel bit her lip. "I can try to move some things around, but the investors traveled here specifically to see you. They're only in town for today." Connor stood, crossing to the floor-to-ceiling window. He stared at the city skyline, remembering how, just a few months ago, he thrived on the adrenaline of these negotiations. Now, all he could picture were two anxious 9-year-olds waiting in a hospital corridor. He turned back to Rachel. "Do what you can to stall them. I'll attend the investor presentation remotely if I have to, but I'm not missing Amy's final consult." She nodded and swiftly exited. Connor sat down again, phone still vibrating with notifications. Despite the tension knotting his stomach, an odd sense of clarity settled in his mind. He wasn't about to abandon Amy or her children, no matter the cost. A short while later, he slipped out of Pearson Tower, ignoring the glares from a few junior associates who passed him in the lobby. His driver, Richard, waited at the curb, and within minutes they were weaving through Manhattan's late morning traffic. The entire ride, Connor kept glancing at his phone, bracing for the backlash from the board. At the hospital, he found Amy pacing near the receptionist desk. She wore a thin sweater over her shoulders, looking paler than usual. Thomas and Timothy stood by the vending machine, collecting loose change to buy candy. They visibly brightened when they saw Connor. "You made it," Amy breathed, relief replacing some of the worry in her eyes. "Of course," Connor said gently. "We're in this together. Ready for the consult." She nodded, exhaling shakily. As they moved down the hall, Dr. Harrison appeared, wearing a calm yet focused expression. He shook Connor's hand firmly. "Glad to see you here. Let's head in." Behind closed doors, they reviewed the final details, surgical risks, potential complications, and the post-op recovery plan. Amy asked anxious questions, voice wavering each time she mentioned the twins. Dr. Harrison answered with matter-of-fact compassion, but the gravity of the situation was clear. They needed to act soon. Halfway through Dr. Harrison's explanation, Connor's phone started buzzing. He glanced down, seeing Vanessa's name. He silenced it immediately. Amy noticed and cast him a concerned look. "Do you need to go?" she asked softly, voice betraying her fear that she might be pulling him away from something critical. Connor shook his head. "This is where I need to be," he said firmly. "Doctor." Harrison slid some paperwork across the desk for Amy's signature, finalizing the date for the operation. "Barring any last-minute administrative delays, we'll do this on Thursday morning," he announced. Amy's hands trembled as she picked up the pen. Connor gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, feeling the weight of every choice bearing down on him. The confrontation with the board was inevitable, but in that moment he realized the consequences of ignoring Amy's plight would be far worse, an emptiness he might never forgive himself for. When the consult concluded, Amy walked out, clutching the signed forms to her chest. Thomas and Timothy waited in the hallway, eyes searching for any sign of good or bad news. Connor gave them a tentative nod, indicating they had hope. Yet as they stepped into the corridor, a new text flashed across Connor's screen. The board was demanding an immediate response to his absence. He imagined the chaos back at Pearson Tower, the alarmed investors, the string of accusations Vanessa would likely be hurling in his name. He glanced at Amy, then at the twins, and felt the unmistakable pull of moral certainty. For the first time in his life, corporate success wasn't his top priority. And though it felt like stepping off a ledge, he knew he had chosen the path he'd follow, no matter the consequences that might unfold. That evening, Connor drove Amy and the twins back to the apartment, carrying plastic bags filled with groceries. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in pastel hues. City lights blinked on, reflecting in puddles along the sidewalk. Once inside, they discovered Kelly, Amy's close friend, waiting in the living room with a worried expression. Kelly, 34, wore purple scrubs and had her dark hair pulled back. She rose immediately. "I was just checking on Amy. She mentioned finalizing surgery details." Her gaze flicked over Connor, her curiosity evident. At first, she'd been guarded about him, but she'd softened as it became clear he was genuine in his help. Thomas and Timothy announced they were starving and launched into a mini-war over who got to boil the pasta. Connor and Kelly shared an amused glance as they hustled the boys into the kitchen. Meanwhile, Amy sank onto the couch, exhausted from the day's stress. Connor settled beside her. "Doing all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her eyes glistened with fatigue. "It's just, everything's happening so fast, and there's something I think you should know, something about my past that might matter." He sensed her apprehension. "I'm listening." Amy exhaled shakily. The twins' father, David Mercer, walked out when they were 2. He was a talented photographer, got an opportunity to travel internationally. I was juggling my own photography gigs and trying to raise the boys while dealing with my early symptoms. I told myself he'd return, but he never did. The last I heard, he was in Europe, chasing big projects. Connor felt a surge of sympathy, recalling his own distant father who rarely showed affection. "I'm sorry," he murmured, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "Does he stay in contact at all?" She shook her head. "A birthday card here or there, but no meaningful support. I never wanted to be the reason he missed his dreams, but the fact that he could just leave us like that." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Anyway, I want you to know that the boys aren't used to men sticking around." Connor's chest tightened. His mind flickered to the regrets of his own broken marriage, to the responsibilities he'd once dodged with single-minded focus on business. Yet there he was, drawn to a family that had every reason to distrust such commitment. Before he could respond, Timothy padded in from the kitchen, frowning. "Mum, you okay?" Amy quickly brushed away her tear. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just talking with Connor." Timothy glanced at Connor, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You're not leaving soon, are you?" Connor shook his head gently. "No, I'll stay a while." Kelly joined them, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She regarded Connor with a level stare. "You've clearly turned these kids' lives upside down. They believe in you. Amy does too. If you're not sure about what you're doing here, say so now." He met her gaze. "I am sure as I can be." Kelly studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "All right." "Then I'll back off," she said with a wry smile. "Amy's lucky to have someone stepping up, but I worry. These kids have been let down before." Connor understood. The unspoken question was whether he'd dash their hopes like so many men did before. But every day he spent with them, cooking, comforting, planning for Amy's surgery, anchored him more deeply in their lives. When Kelly left, Amy asked Connor to stay for a simple dinner. Over plates of pasta, they reminisced about photography and the odd coincidences linking their pasts. At one point, Amy gently pressed him about his failed marriage. "What happened between you and Vanessa, really?" she asked, glancing away as if worried about invading his privacy. Connor sighed. "We were 2 ambitious people who realized too late that success was all we had in common. My own health scare made me retreat into work even more, which only widened the rift. She grew resentful. I grew cold. Eventually, we divorced, but she's still CFO. We never fully severed ties." Amy murmured a sympathetic response, and for a moment, the only sounds were forks clinking against plates. Thomas and Timothy talked in hushed tones, occasionally whispering conspiratorially about dessert. At the end of the meal, as Connor helped clear the table, he felt an odd mixture of sadness and warmth. Sadness for the chapters in both their lives marred by abandonment or emotional distance, but warmth from a renewed sense that these echoes from the past were forging a deeper bond. one grounded in honesty rather than perfected facades. Outside, the night sky hung over Manhattan with a gentle hush. Through the window, Connor glimpsed the city lights, reminded of the world he'd once worshipped. But here, amid the laughter of children and the shared vulnerability of two adults battered by life, he felt a promise that genuine connection could still be salvaged from broken dreams. It happened on a Friday afternoon, just as the hospital released Amy for a brief weekend rest before her scheduled surgery. Connor and the twins helped her navigate the short walk from the elevator to the apartment door, their arms laden with flowers, balloons, and a small bag of prescriptions. Inside, a faint sense of relief permeated the space. In only a few days, they would face the operation that could save Amy's life. Then came a sharp knock. Before anyone could answer, the door swung open, revealing Vanessa Pearson in a sleek navy dress, her posture rigid with pent-up fury. She clutched a lavish bouquet of roses so large it seemed more like an ostentatious gesture than a gift. Amy froze, leaning against the couch for balance. Thomas and Timothy exchanged startled glances. Connor stepped forward, voice low and firm. "Vanessa, what are you doing here?" Vanessa's expression flickered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I just wanted to deliver these flowers personally, a gesture of goodwill for Ms. Foster." She extended the bouquet with exaggerated grace, her cold blue eyes scanning the apartment. "After all, I hear she's quite unwell." Amy accepted the bouquet hesitantly, unsettled by Vanessa's mocking tone. "Thank you," she managed. Though her confusion was obvious, the entire room felt charged. Connor clenched his jaw, trying to keep his temper in check. "Vanessa, if you want to talk business, we can do it somewhere else." "You have no right to show up unannounced." She gave him a withering look. "Don't act surprised. You stopped answering my calls and ignoring my memos. How else was I supposed to get your attention?" She turned her gaze to Amy, who stood pale and unsteady. "I wanted to meet the woman who's single-handedly destroying our merger." "That's enough," Connor snapped, stepping protectively between them. Vanessa's eyes sparked. "Is it? Because from where I stand, you've abandoned your responsibilities. Our board is left reeling. Investors are second-guessing everything we've built. Meanwhile, you play house in this cramped apartment." Amy swallowed hard, clearly hurt by the insinuation. "Look, I'm sorry. It was never my intention to—" Vanessa cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Oh, please, don't apologize. You're just living your life. It's Connor who can't decide whether he wants to be the rich, successful CEO or some do-gooder for a sob story." Thomas and Timothy bristled, fists clenched. Connor placed a calming hand on Thomas's shoulder to keep him from retaliating. His own anger threatened to boil over, but he struggled for composure. "You're out of line, Vanessa. I told you my reasons. Amy needs help that I'm in a position to provide." She folded her arms, nails tapping against her forearm. "Yes, and if it were just your personal fortune, I might not care, but you're jeopardizing the entire firm. I won't let you sink the company or my career." Amy's legs trembled, and Timothy rushed to support her. Seeing Amy in distress jolted Connor's protective instincts into overdrive. "You need to leave," he said to Vanessa, voice tight. Vanessa's lips curled in a sneer. "Fine. But know this, if you continue on this path, I'll have no choice but to present your negligence to the board. And if that means you lose the CEO title you cherish so much, don't say I didn't warn you." She pivoted sharply, the heavy floral scent trailing behind her. At the door, she paused, throwing a final daggered glance over her shoulder. "Best of luck with the surgery," she said acidly, then disappeared. An unsettling silence clung to the air after she left. Amy set the extravagant roses on the kitchen counter, her hands shaking. I'm so sorry, Connor," she murmured, tears in her eyes. "She's furious because of me." Connor turned to her, his voice softening. Hey, this isn't your fault. She's upset about losing control, over me, over the merger, over everything. Thomas, tears of anger welling up, asked, "Is she gonna hurt Mom?" Timothy chimed in, voice trembling, "Or stop you from helping?" Connor knelt, meeting their worried eyes. "She can't hurt your mom, and I won't abandon you. No matter what happens with the company, I won't walk away." Amy took an unsteady breath, blinking away tears. "You might lose everything, Connor." He reached for her hand, gently lacing his fingers through hers. "I already lost too much in the past by focusing on the wrong things. I'm not making that mistake again." Outside, the city's hum carried on as usual, but for those in that small apartment, a new threshold had been crossed. Vanessa's fury had broken whatever illusion of peaceful coexistence remained, and her so-called flowers felt more like a threat than a gift. Despite the tension, Connor felt his convictions deepen. Let the chips fall where they may. This family meant more than any corporate throne he'd once obsessed over. The afternoon before Amy's surgery dawned, with a crisp autumn wind blowing through Manhattan's streets. Connor arrived at the Foster apartment early, carrying a basket of fresh fruit and a folder of medical instructions. He found the twins rushing about, collecting last-minute items for their mother's hospital stay, while Amy tried to remain calm in the midst of the chaos. She greeted Connor at the door, her face etched with fatigue, but underlined by a determined light. "You're early," she noted, managing a faint smile. "I wanted to help you prepare." He set the fruit basket on the kitchen counter. "How are you feeling?" Amy ran a hand through her hair, nervous but ready. "Doctor." "Harrison called. He's arranged everything for tomorrow morning." They settled around the small kitchen table, going over forms and discussing the next day's schedule. Thomas and Timothy listened closely, fear shadowing their wide eyes. Connor explained that he'd stay at the hospital all day, no matter what happened with the board's demands. Every so often, Amy would glance at him, a mixture of gratitude and worry crossing her face. Around mid-morning, Kelly dropped by with a bouquet of cheerful sunflowers. She hugged Amy tight, then turned to Connor. "Anything we still need?" Connor consulted his phone. "I've taken care of hospital check-in, and Dr. Harrison's team has the updated insurance details. Honestly, I think we're as prepared as we can be." Kelly patted Amy's shoulder, trying to keep her own emotions in check. "Then let's focus on making today as peaceful as possible." They spent the afternoon in quiet arrangements, packing an overnight bag for Amy, rechecking paperwork, preparing a stack of photographs that Amy insisted on bringing as a comfort item. Timothy lingered by Connor's side, occasionally tugging on his sleeve to ask questions about the surgery. Connor did his best to give honest but reassuring answers. At one point, the apartment phone rang. Amy picked it up, expecting another well-wishing call, only to freeze. She mouthed the word Vanessa at Connor, who stiffened. A tense moment passed before Amy said politely, "He's here, but now's not a good time. I'm sorry, Ms. Pearson." As she hung up, Connor exhaled. "What did she say?" Amy looked pained. "She claimed she just wanted to check if you'd attend some big investor meeting tomorrow. Told me to remind you that everything's on the line." Connor's expression hardened. "Let it go. Tomorrow, my only priority is you." Later in the evening, while Kelly took the twins out for a quick walk to burn off their nervous energy, Amy and Connor found themselves alone in the softly lit living room. She sank onto the couch, hands folded in her lap. "This is the last night before everything changes," she said quietly. Connor nodded, taking a seat next to her. "I know you're scared. I wish there was a way to make it easier." Amy smiled ruefully. "You've already done so much. She trailed off, swallowing hard. "I worry about your job, your future. If this doesn't go well, or if Vanessa makes the board remove you." He took her hand gently. "I told you, That's secondary. The company can replace me. The twins can't replace their mother. Emotion flickered in her eyes. When I first met you, you were so distant. Like you lived behind a wall of money and power. I never expected you to show such warmth, to care this deeply. Connor managed a small, self-conscious laugh. I didn't expect it either, but life throws curveballs. Maybe this was a wake-up call I needed. They sat there for a few moments, absorbing the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint traffic noises from outside. Then the front door opened and the twins returned, cheeks rosy from the chilly air. Thomas held up a plastic bag containing novelty socks for Amy to wear at the hospital, bright pink with tiny hearts. To bring you luck, he explained, looking both earnest and anxious. Amy's eyes misted. She drew both boys into a hug, and Connor joined them, forming a protective huddle. It was a simple moment, unremarkable except for the weight of what was about to happen the next day. As night settled in, they shared a light dinner, forcing conversation about everyday things, school projects, a new superhero movie, jokes from Kelly's hospital co-workers. Beneath the surface, tension simmered. Everyone knew that dawn would bring the biggest test of their resilience so far. Connor, resisting the urge to check his phone for company updates, gathered pillows and blankets in the living room. He planned to stay the night, just in case Amy needed anything. "We'll get through tomorrow," he told them, voice steadier than he felt. And in that small apartment, braced for the trials of the coming morning, they formed the closest thing to family Connor had ever known. Dawn broke over Manhattan with a steely gray light, a fitting backdrop for the day's gravity. Connor roused the twins at 5 in the morning, coaxing them awake with gentle insistence. Despite their bleary eyes, they hurried to gather the bags and help their mother into the Bentley waiting outside. Amy, wrapped in a warm coat, clutched the handles of her overnight bag and breathed shallowly, as though conserving every bit of energy for the ordeal ahead. Richard, Connor's driver, navigated the quiet pre-rush hour streets toward the Manhattan Cardiac Institute. No one in the car spoke much. The tension was palpable, each passenger lost in private thoughts of hope or fear. At the hospital's main entrance, Dr. Harrison's team was already expecting them. A nurse led Amy to a pre-op room where an IV was inserted and final checks began. Thomas and Timothy lingered close, eyes wide, struggling to be brave for their mother's sake. Connor stepped outside to make sure all the paperwork was in order, signing final consent forms on Amy's behalf. His phone vibrated with repeated calls from Pearson Tower. He silenced it, only allowing himself a brief text to Rachel. "I'm unavailable today. Handle what you can." Inside, the pre-op routine progressed quickly. Amy changed into a hospital gown, and the anesthesiologist stopped by to explain how they'd sedate her. Each professional wore a calm, reassuring air, but the twins remained on edge. Connor wrapped an arm around their shoulders, murmuring comforting words. They nodded, but he could feel them trembling. Before the surgical team wheeled Amy away, Dr. Harrison paused to address them. "We're going to do everything in our power. It's a complicated procedure, but I'm optimistic." Then his gaze fell on Connor, and he added, "We'll update you as often as we can. Stay close." Amy reached for Connor's hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes shone with a courage that took his breath away. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not letting me face this alone." He squeezed her hand gently. "We'll be here when you wake up." The operating room doors closed behind her, leaving Connor and the boys in a sterile white corridor that felt oppressively silent. Timothy buried his face in Connor's side, while Thomas stared at the doors as though willing them to open again. A nurse gently directed them to a waiting area with comfortable chairs and muted lighting, the typical hospital attempts at comfort. Hours stretched out. The twins dozed fitfully in chairs, occasionally jolting awake if a nurse passed by. Connor paced, sipped too many cups of bad coffee, and stepped outside only once for a breath of fresh air. Each tick of the wall clock hammered at his nerves. Midway through, Dr. Harrison sent word that the surgery was more complex than anticipated. Extra steps had to be taken, and the procedure could extend well beyond the original estimate. Connor's stomach clenched at the news. He didn't share every detail with the twins, but they sensed something was off. By mid-afternoon, Kelly arrived, still in her nurse's scrubs. She offered hugs to the boys and a supportive nod to Connor. "I'll stay as long as it takes," she said, settling into a chair. Her presence provided some solace, a reminder that they weren't alone. Meanwhile, texts kept popping up on Connor's phone, some from Gregory Winters, who tried to keep the merger negotiations afloat, others from Vanessa, whose tone escalated with each ignored message. Connor shoved the phone into his pocket, refusing to let corporate crises overshadow Amy's life and death moment. If he was to lose his position as CEO, so be it. Time crawled. Timothy eventually fell asleep against Kelly's shoulder, and Thomas stared listlessly at a medical pamphlet about cardiac procedures. Connor resumed pacing, each footstep echoing on the tile floor. Memories of his own surgery drifted through his mind. He recalled the lonely hospital room, how he'd pushed everyone away afterward, immersing himself in work. This time, he was on the other side, desperately wanting to help. Suddenly, Dr. Harrison emerged, his surgical mask dangling from one ear, worry etched into the lines around his eyes. Connor's heart froze. "We've run into some complications," Dr. Harrison said quietly. "The procedure is still ongoing, but it's proving more challenging than we anticipated. Amy's condition is stable, but we can't rush any of this." Connor's voice cracked. "Is there anything I can do?" Dr. Harrison offered a faint, reassuring nod. "Not out here. Just keep praying, or whatever it is you do to stay strong. I'll return when we know more." With that, he vanished back through the double doors, leaving Connor feeling utterly helpless. He placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. Watching the boy's lip tremble, the waiting area's stillness felt suffocating. Minutes blurred into hours, the overhead lights starting to sting their eyes. Night descended on the city, but the hospital lights remained bright and unyielding. Connor realized he hadn't eaten all day, but he couldn't bear leaving the corridor. The twins nestled together in two chairs, leaning on each other. As the clock neared 9 in the evening, another brief update arrived. Dr. Harrison was still fighting to stabilize Amy, but her heart was responding, albeit slowly. Connor inhaled a shaky breath. These were the hardest hours he'd ever lived through, a vigil steeped in fear and faint glimmers of hope. Whatever happened next, he knew his life would never be the same. A nurse's gentle voice roused Connor from a fitful doze in the hospital waiting area. He glanced up blearily, seeing the red digits on the clock read past midnight. Thomas and Timothy were huddled against each other on a small love seat, their arms intertwined in restless sleep. Kelly dozed upright in a plastic chair, posture stiff from hours of tense waiting. Across the corridor, Dr. Harrison stood by the double doors to the operating rooms, mask pulled below his chin, his expression solemn. Connor's heart thumped wildly as he rose. "Doctor?" he asked, voice rasping from disuse. "Is she—" Dr. Harrison beckoned him closer, away from where the boys slept. "We encountered significant complications," he began quietly, voice taut with exhaustion. "Amy's heart needed more extensive repair than we initially believed, and her body went into shock halfway through the procedure. We had to perform a blood transfusion and install a temporary mechanical assist device." Connor felt cold dread creeping up his spine. "Is she still in surgery?" Dr. Harrison nodded. "Yes, but we're nearing the final stages now." Her vitals have stabilized for the moment. I can't promise there won't be more hurdles, but we're cautiously optimistic. He placed a comforting hand on Connor's shoulder. I know it's been a long, terrible wait, but hang in there. Once we close up and move her to recovery, I'll update you again. Connor managed a stiff nod, too overwhelmed to speak. Dr. Harrison disappeared behind the operating room doors. For a moment, Connor simply stood there, drawing in slow, deliberate breaths to keep himself from losing control. Then he moved to the sleeping twins. Carefully, he knelt beside Timothy, touching the boy's shoulder. Timothy stirred, blinking in confusion. "Did they fix Mom yet?" he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. Connor smoothed the boy's hair gently. Dr. Harrison's finishing up. "It was harder than they thought, but she's still fighting." He forced a soft smile, trying to radiate hope. Thomas stirred as well, rubbing his eyes and pulling his legs closer to his chest. Kelly stood, joints cracking in protest. "Should we call anyone or—" She hesitated, glancing at the anxious lines furrowing Connor's forehead. He shook his head. "I've already set my phone to silent. Messages from the office are piling up, I'm sure. Nothing else matters right now." His eyes flicked to the phone on a small side table, the screen showing endless missed calls and texts from Vanessa, various board members, and even Gregory Winters. The minutes dragged, each second filled with the hush of the hospital at night. Occasionally, staff-wheeled carts passed, or muffled announcements echoed over the intercom. The entire world outside seemed to shrink, overshadowed by the drama unfolding behind the sealed doors. At last, around 2 in the morning, Dr. Harrison reappeared, still in scrubs and looking more exhausted than before. Connor stood so abruptly he nearly toppled his chair. Thomas and Timothy gripped each other's hands, hearts pounding. "She's alive," Dr. Harrison said, exhaling. "We've done all we can surgically. Her heart responded better than I expected once we got past the rough patch. She's being moved to the ICU now. The next 24 hours are critical. If she stabilizes, we'll be cautiously optimistic." A collective gasp of relief escaped them. Timothy buried his face in Thomas's shoulder, tears of sheer relief soaking his brother's sleeve. Kelly closed her eyes, whispering a silent thanks. Connor swallowed, feeling his own tears threaten to surface. "Can we see her?" he asked softly. Dr. Harrison lifted a hand in caution. "Only for a few minutes at a time. One visitor at a time, initially. She's deeply sedated, and we've left a mechanical support device to assist her heart until it can function on its own." Despite the cautious tone, hope flickered in Connor's chest. He turned to the twins, who stared at Dr. Harrison with unblinking gratitude. "You boys can see her soon," Dr. Harrison added gently, "but let's get her settled first." They followed him down hushed corridors toward the ICU. The overhead lights cast harsh reflections on linoleum floors, and the antiseptic smell seemed amplified in the silence of early morning. Eventually, they reached Amy's room. Through a glass panel, Connor could see her connected to monitors and IV drips, a ventilator tube taped at her mouth, machines beeping softly. Her face looked pale and fragile, almost unrecognizable, without the spark of life in her eyes. Timothy started forward, but Connor gently held him back. "I'll check on her first, then you can both take turns. Let's not overwhelm her right away." Inside the room, Connor approached the bed, every step feeling like a prayer. The rhythmic beep of the monitor was the best sound he'd heard all day. It meant she was still here. He reached for her hand, gently cradling it, mindful of the tubes. It was warm, real, alive. "We're here, Amy," he whispered, voice trembling. "You did it. Just keep fighting." Amy remained unconscious, longer than Dr. Harrison originally anticipated, and the hours crawled by in a haze of cautious waiting. Each day, Connor arrived at the ICU before dawn, helping the twins navigate their morning routines. Kelly pitched in whenever her nursing shift allowed. They took turns sitting by Amy's bedside, reading to her, telling stories of mundane daily events, praying she might hear their voices. On the second day post-op, Dr. Harrison informed them that Amy's vitals were improving, though slowly. The mechanical assist device continued to support her heart function, but lab work showed encouraging signs. Relief mingled with residual anxiety. The progress was good, but nothing was certain yet. Connor stood at Amy's bedside, a half-finished cup of hospital coffee growing cold on the window ledge. He studied her face, searching for subtle changes. The sedation had been reduced incrementally, allowing her body a chance to respond naturally. Her eyelids occasionally fluttered, a sign of near consciousness that made Connor's pulse race with hope. Timothy approached, carrying a drawing he'd made in the waiting room, a simple crayon sketch of their family, newly inclusive of Connor, all smiling in front of the apartment building. He gently slid it onto the nightstand near the machines that blinked with readouts of her heart rate and oxygen levels. "Mom," he said softly, "we're all here. Please wake up soon." That evening, as Connor lingered to watch over her, a nurse rushed in, gesturing at the monitors. The numbers began to spike. For one terrifying moment, Connor feared the worst, a relapse or new complication, but Dr. Harrison hurried in and calmed him. Her body's reacting. That spike could be her fight-or-flight response, pulling her out of sedation. Sure enough, Amy's eyes struggled to open, flickering under fluorescent light. Her breathing hitched, and the nurse adjusted the ventilator settings. Gradually, her eyelids rose enough to reveal a murky green stare that drifted in confusion. Connor's chest tightened. He stepped closer, gently taking her hand. "Amy," he whispered, voice unsteady. "You're in the hospital. The surgery is over, and Dr. Harrison says you're making progress. We're all here, waiting for you." She blinked slowly, trying to focus on the shapes around her. The sedation left her groggy, and the ventilator tube prevented her from speaking. Yet there was a flicker of recognition in her weary gaze when it landed on Connor. A tear slid from the corner of her eye. A swirl of relief and emotion threatened to overwhelm him. "That's it. Keep breathing," he murmured, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "The boys are here too, and Kelly, everybody's rooting for you." Amy's fingers weakly curled around his. The nurse stepped in to check her sedation levels and ensure she wasn't in pain. Dr. Harrison motioned Connor aside, his voice quiet. "She's not fully alert yet, but this is good progress. We'll assess her neurological responses over the next 24 hours. Connor nodded, feeling tears prick at his eyes. He composed himself enough to summon Timothy and Thomas from the hall. They peeked in, hearts pounding. The nurse allowed them to stand at the foot of the bed for just a moment. Timothy gasped at the sight of her partially open eyes. Thomas let out a soft whimper, pressing a hand to his mouth. "She's coming back," Connor assured them, voice still shaky with relief. "Slowly, but she's fighting." Later that night, after the hospital's visiting hours ended, Connor convinced the boys to go home with Kelly to sleep. He stayed behind, perched in a small armchair by the bed. The beep of the monitors and the steady whoosh of the ventilator became a lullaby of hope. Sometime around midnight, Amy stirred again, brow furrowing. She gazed at him through half-lidded eyes. Connor stood, leaning in so she could see him clearly. "I'm here," he reminded her. Her mouth moved wordlessly around the ventilator tube. Her eyelids drifted closed again, but not before a faint squeeze of his hand confirmed that she recognized him. Leaning back, he closed his own eyes, exhaustion finally setting in. A fragile sense of peace settled over him, one he had not felt in years. As her chest rose and fell in rhythmic certainty, he realized this fight, while far from over, had reached a pivotal turning point. 2 days after regaining partial consciousness, Amy was eased off the ventilator. Her throat felt raw and her voice was fragile, but she could finally whisper. The boys were ecstatic, hovering by her bed every chance they got, chattering about school updates and how Connor had been attempting to cook in her absence, often to comedic effect. Though she was still weak, color gradually returned to her cheeks. For Connor, the ICU room had become his temporary headquarters. He set up a laptop on a small table by the window, juggling calls from Pearson Investments. Gregory Winters had been doing his best to mitigate damage from Connor's absence, while Vanessa pressured the board to demand Connor's immediate return or resignation. The tension weighed on him, but each time Amy opened her eyes to greet him, he remembered why he remained steadfast. Late one afternoon, after Thomas and Timothy returned home with Kelly to prepare for school the next day, Connor found himself alone with Amy again. She was awake, trying to sip some lukewarm broth, her hands trembling a little around the plastic cup. He helped steady her grip, careful not to overstep. She managed a feeble smile. "You'll make a decent nurse yet," he chuckled softly. "I doubt that, but if you need an extra set of hands, I'm here." They lapsed into a thoughtful silence, listening to the soft beeps and distant hum of the ICU. Finally, Amy set the cup aside, gaze drifting to the small stack of photographs on the nightstand. Timothy's colorful drawings were sandwiched between images from her wedding photography days. She picked up one photo, a bride smiling radiantly beneath arching ivy, and turned it over. Her fingers traced the edges as though searching for lost time. "I used to believe every photo told a complete story," she murmured, voice husky. "But the older I get, the more I realize pictures can't capture what goes unsaid." She paused, eyes catching Connor's. "Like how you were hurting at your own wedding. Or how I was already struggling with symptoms while shooting some of those celebrations." Connor swallowed, an ache forming in his chest. "I suppose we both hid behind lenses. Mine was the corporate view, yours the camera." Amy nodded, lips trembling slightly. "I never thanked you properly for all of this. You stepped in without hesitation, even though we barely knew each other." He cleared his throat. "You thanked me plenty. Besides, the boys deserve it. They shouldn't lose their mom." Amy's eyes glistened with emotion. "I owe you more than I could ever repay, but there's also guilt. I don't want you sacrificing your entire career, your life, for me." Connor hesitated, gathering his thoughts. He couldn't deny that the price had been high, with the board and Vanessa breathing down his neck. Still, his perspective had shifted. "I've spent years believing my career was the most important thing in the world," he said quietly. "I climbed every ladder, chased every deal, thinking it would fill some void. But after seeing how you and the twins fight for every moment, I realized I was missing connection, purpose." She listened, tears brimming again. Connor continued, choosing words carefully. "Maybe that's what I needed to learn all along. I don't regret helping you." "Not one bit." Amy gently laid the photo aside, her gaze never leaving his. "I just don't want you to regret it later, if everything at Pearson Investments crumbles." A wry half-smile flickered on his face. "Maybe it needs to crumble so something better can be built, or maybe there's a way to balance both. Either way, I'm prepared for the consequences." She exhaled, a subtle tremor in her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for seeing me. For standing by us when you didn't have to." He reached out and covered her hand with his, the unspoken words between them heavier than any declaration. Her gaze fluttered away shyly, but she didn't pull back. In the small ICU room, the mechanical hum of devices and the beep of monitors framed a moment of profound intimacy. Eventually, a nurse stepped in to check Amy's vitals, effectively ending their private exchange. Connor withdrew his hand, but the warmth lingered. Whatever might happen next, board ultimatums, financial fallout, or shifting priorities, he knew neither of them would be alone. Something deep was forming between them, binding them more powerfully than words could express. Outside, twilight settled over the city, the lights of Manhattan twinkling beyond the hospital windows. For so long, that skyline had symbolized all of Connor's ambitions. Now, it seemed a distant glow against the real meaning unfolding here, in a hospital bed, with a fragile woman whose quiet courage reminded him that some battles are won not on trading floors or boardrooms, but in the tender space where hearts choose to heal together. 1 week after Amy's surgery, she was stable enough to move out of the ICU and into a private recovery room. Although still weak, she no longer needed the mechanical assist device, and her cardiologist noted remarkable improvement in her heart function. For the Foster family, it felt like stepping into a new dawn. Yet outside the hospital's walls, Connor's corporate world continued to quake. Vanessa had marshaled keyboard members to question his fitness as CEO. Rumors circulated that he might be replaced, at least temporarily, citing personal matters interfering with professional obligations. Gregory Winters tried valiantly to defend Connor's reputation, but the pressure was unrelenting. By the time Amy was transferred to a quieter floor, Connor had a crucial decision to make. That morning, he arrived at the hospital with a briefcase full of documents and a determined glint in his eye. The twins were in school, and Amy was resting when he slipped into her new room. Sunlight streamed through the large window, illuminating her as she flicked through a magazine. "You look serious," she observed, smiling faintly at the sight of his pressed suit and the stern set of his jaw. He pulled a chair beside her bed. "I have a meeting with the board in a couple hours. They want me to step down or commit fully. No more half measures." Amy bit her lip. "And you're here instead of preparing for that meeting?" Connor nodded, setting the briefcase on the floor. "I wanted to talk to you first. I have an offer from the board. Basically, they'll let me keep my role if I promise to refocus on the merger and lead a major expansion plan. But it means longer hours, business travel, and minimal personal time. I might have to sacrifice these daily check-ins with you, at least for a while." She absorbed the information, sadness flickering in her eyes. "Connor, that's your life's work. I don't want you to lose everything because of me." He reached for her hand, cradling it gently. "What if I don't want that life anymore? At least not in the same way. I've spent time these past weeks thinking about alternatives. There's an option where I stay on as a partial consultant or an executive chairman, stepping away from daily CEO tasks. Gregory Winters could handle the operational helm. That would allow me more freedom, time with you and the boys, and the chance to manage a new philanthropic foundation aimed at helping families like yours." Her eyes widened. "You'd do that? Give up your position?" Connor shrugged, though a tinge of sadness crossed his face. "I built Pearson Investments from the ground up, but maybe it's time for someone else to steer it through the next phase. I can still be involved, just not as the unyielding face of the company. I'd be free to devote myself to what matters more." He swallowed, gazing intently at her. "Like you, and Thomas, and Timothy." Amy blinked back tears. She reached her free hand toward the folder of hospital bills on the side table, remembering how impossible it once felt to handle them alone. The foundation idea could help so many people who fall through the cracks, people like me who can't afford experimental procedures. Emotions strained her voice. "Are you sure you're ready for that shift? Won't you regret stepping aside from daily power?" He thought about it, the edges of his mouth curving into a gentle smile. "Regret? I don't think so. I'll still have influence. I've already poured my life into the company, so stepping back doesn't erase that legacy. This is about using what I've built to do good, and that's something I'm willing, even eager to do." For a moment, the gravity of his words filled the room. Amy squeezed his hand, the realization sinking in that Connor's transformation was genuine. His identity was no longer bound purely to executive success. Eventually, she nodded, voice soft. Then I support you, whatever you choose. He pressed a light kiss to the back of her hand. Good, because as soon as I'm done with the board today, I plan to come back here and spend time finalizing a few ideas about our new foundation. Let them call me crazy or sentimental. I know what I want. Amy's cheeks flushed slightly, a hopeful smile lighting her face. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Connor gently released her hand and stood. Wish me luck. Who knows what they'll throw at me, but I'm ready to meet them halfway on my own terms. Walking out, he could almost feel the old weight lifting from his shoulders. The corridors of the hospital, once a place of dread, had become a space of clarity and new beginnings. Outside, the brisk Manhattan air hit his face as he slid into the Bentley. He glanced at the towering skyline with fresh eyes. The city that once symbolized relentless ambition now represented possibility for love, for family, and for a more balanced life. Amy Foster came home on a bright afternoon, just over 2 weeks after her surgery. Though still fragile, she felt an exhilarating rush of victory stepping through the apartment door. Thomas and Timothy had decorated the small living room with homemade welcome signs, balloons, and a string of little paper hearts, a labor of love that made her heart ache with gratitude. Connor was right behind her, carrying a small bag of post-op medications. As soon as Amy eased onto the couch, she spotted that he had installed helpful modifications around the apartment while she was hospitalized. Handrails near the bathroom, extra pillows for support, and even a small portable oxygen tank as a precaution. The changes didn't feel intrusive or clinical. They felt comforting, a reflection of someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. Thomas clapped his hands. Mom, look. We set up the corner by the window with all your photo books. You can rest and read there. Timothy pointed to a side table. And your camera's right there, charged and ready whenever you want it. Amy took in the warm, domestic scene, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She had worried about feeling like a burden, but the children's excitement and Connor's gentle attentiveness replaced those fears with a sense of belonging. Thank you, she breathed, voice quivering. Connor smiled, setting the medication bag on a nearby shelf. We're all in this together. Now, let's get you situated. Want some tea? She nodded, and he headed into the compact kitchen. The twins hopped around the living room, brimming with stories about school projects and a neighborhood cat that occasionally peered through the window. After a minute, they bolted outside to fetch Mrs. Jenkins, who had been anxiously awaiting Amy's return. By the time Connor returned with a mug of chamomile tea, Mrs. Jenkins was already fussing over Amy, clucking that she needed blankets and rest. Connor set the tea down and gently guided the neighbor aside. We've got it handled, Mrs. Jenkins, but thank you. Your support means the world. Eventually, Mrs. Jenkins relented, promising to drop off homemade soup later. Once the door closed, Amy sank deeper into the couch, fatigue creeping over her. Connor eased beside her, letting her lean against him. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet hum of traffic outside seeped through the windows, mingling with the soft whir of the space heater. How did your board meeting go? She finally asked, her head resting on his shoulder. Connor exhaled. As expected, a mix of surprise and resistance. I presented them a plan to step away from daily CEO responsibilities, letting Gregory become interim CEO. I remain executive chairman and a major shareholder. They balked at first, but they realized the alternative could be worse, namely losing me altogether in a big public fight. So we struck a deal. Amy turned her head, eyes filled with relief. That's amazing. Are you okay with it? Truly? He brushed her hair back gently. I am. I feel freer than I have in years. And I told them about the foundation I'm creating, Foster Pearson, if that's all right with you. He paused, searching her face. We'll support families who can't afford life-saving procedures. It's personal now. Her eyes brimmed with tears again. Of course I'm okay with it, but I still can't believe you're doing so much for us. He offered a rueful grin. It's not just for you. It's for me, too. For these kids, for the possibility of living a life that's more than just stock tickers and market projections. Timothy and Thomas burst back inside at that moment, giggling breathlessly. Mrs. Jenkins gave us more brownies, they announced, plopping onto the floor, brandishing a foil-covered plate. Amy laughed, the sound carrying a bright note that hadn't been there before. We might need to rename brownies around here, she teased. They've become a bit of a family symbol. Connor looked at her, then at the twins. Indeed, everything had come full circle. From those desperate brownie sales on a Manhattan sidewalk to this gathering in a cozy apartment they all now shared in spirit. He drew the boys closer, and Amy reached for them, forming a small huddle of warmth and relief. In that snug living room, the trials of surgery and corporate showdowns felt distant, replaced by a profound peace. Connor felt the final puzzle piece click into place. This was home, a place not defined by glass penthouses or massive boardrooms, but by kindness, second chances, and a love so real it eclipsed every past regret. He leaned in, brushing a soft kiss to Amy's temple. She smiled, eyes shining with the promise of a future they would shape together. Connor Pearson stood in the airy conference room of Bennett and Associates, a respected Manhattan law firm. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, reflecting on polished mahogany tables. He was here to finalize the creation of the Foster Pearson Foundation, his new venture dedicated to helping families afford advanced medical procedures. Beside him, Amy Foster sat carefully, still somewhat fatigued, but determined to play an active role in this life-altering decision. Lawrence Bennett, a distinguished man in his late 50s, organized a stack of papers on the table. "We're nearly done, Mr. Pearson," he said, peering through thin-framed glasses. "Your foundation will be officially registered once you sign these final documents." He turned to Amy. "And, Ms. Foster, since the foundation bears both your names, we'd love to include your insights as well. You have a powerful perspective that could shape how we assist patients." Amy nodded, exchanging a grateful look with Connor. "I plan to use my photography skills to raise awareness," she explained softly. "People need to see the faces behind these medical statistics, real families who struggle like we did." Connor placed a supportive hand over hers. "Exactly. And the foundation can offer grants, resource connections, anything to relieve financial burdens. No one should have to sell brownies on a street corner to save a loved one." A flutter of memory passed between them. The day he'd first noticed Thomas and Timothy, identical twins braving a crowded Manhattan sidewalk. The moment had set them all on a path none could have predicted. After an hour of signatures, clarifications, and formalities, Lawrence Bennett handed Connor a pen for the final page. "Congratulations," he said. "Foster Pearson is official," Connor exhaled, feeling a subtle sense of closure and a thrilling new beginning. He guided Amy out into the firm's lobby, where Thomas and Timothy were waiting, fidgeting on a leather sofa. The twins jumped up when they saw them, wide-eyed with curiosity. "Is it done?" Thomas asked, glancing at the documents in Connor's hand. Connor ruffled the boy's hair. "It's done. We have a foundation now." Timothy bounced on his toes. "Does that mean we can help other moms like ours?" His tone carried a blend of innocence and hope. Amy's heart squeezed at the thought. "Yes," Connor confirmed, voice warm. "That's exactly what it means." They left the law firm, stepping into a crisp afternoon. A light breeze brushed across the city streets. Amy moved more slowly than she used to, each step reminding her of the delicate progress she'd made since her surgery. But her smile brimmed with quiet confidence, fueled by the knowledge that her life now had renewed purpose. Their next stop was a small neighborhood cafe a few blocks away. Over steaming mugs of hot chocolate for the twins and herbal tea for Amy, they discussed upcoming tasks, building the foundation's website, planning fundraisers, and reaching out to medical professionals willing to partner. "It all feels so big," Amy admitted, blowing gently on her tea. "But in a good way." Connor tapped a note into his phone. "One step at a time. We already have Dr. Harrison's endorsement. He's excited about bridging the gap between innovative procedures and the families who need them most." Thomas's eyes glowed. "Can we help design the logo? We have some ideas." Amy chuckled, nodding. "Absolutely. Let's see your sketches." This is a family project, after all. They spent the next hour brainstorming, the twins contributing doodles of stylized hearts and camera lenses. Connor made notes about potential donors. Amy voiced her desire to showcase patient stories through photo essays. The synergy between them felt natural, weaving their distinct strengths into a unified mission. Later, as they walked Amy back to the apartment, an unhurried stroll past storefronts and autumn gold trees, Connor caught her hand. "I don't think I've ever been this excited about a project," he said quietly. "And this time, it's not about profit margins, it's about people." Amy leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, her own heart beating steadily. "And that's exactly why it will succeed." When they reached her door, Timothy fumbled with the key, eager to show Connor a new drawing for the Foundation's upcoming website. Through all the bustle and hopes for the future, Connor felt a grounding sense of purpose. Each step forward into this new life felt more solid than any corporate triumph he'd known. A few weeks later, Amy Foster leaned against the reception desk of the Gleason Gallery, a respected but intimate art space tucked away in a converted warehouse on Manhattan's West Side. She was checking final details for her photo exhibit, Sacred Scars, set to open in just a few hours. Her heart fluttered with anticipation and a hint of stage fright. This was her first major exhibit since recovering from surgery. The gallery owner, Isabelle Laurent, a poised woman in her early 60s with silver-threaded hair, approached with an encouraging smile. "We've had a strong response so far," she noted. "The concept of photographing scars, both visible and invisible, resonates with many. People are curious to see how you've transformed such a personal struggle into art." Amy nodded, swallowing her nerves. "I just hope it speaks to them the way it does to me," she said. She'd spent hours selecting the images, close-up shots of healing incisions, portraits of post-operative patients with gentle smiles, and abstract photographs capturing fleeting emotions, hope, pain, gratitude, across hospital corridors. Among them were glimpses of Connor's own faint surgical scar, a subtle reminder of his past procedure. Connor arrived just as final preparations wrapped up, wearing a relaxed sport coat instead of his usual corporate suit. Thomas and Timothy bounded in ahead of him, each boy holding a small camera. "We want to do behind-the-scenes footage for the exhibit," Thomas announced proudly. Isabel chuckled, stepping aside as the twins began documenting the final setup. Connor moved closer to Amy, a warm glint in his gray eyes. "You good?" he asked, resting a reassuring hand on her back. She exhaled, nodding. "I'm nervous, but in a good way." As the opening hour approached, guests trickled in, healthcare professionals, former patients, local artists, and a few supporters from the new Foster Pearson Foundation. Connor noticed Dr. Harrison stepping through the doorway, his imposing figure softened by a genuine smile. He waved in greeting, then discreetly joined a small group near the first set of photographs. The buzz grew as visitors circulated through the gallery. Some paused before the images with audible gasps. Others read the accompanying captions, describing personal journeys of survival. The hush that settled around certain pictures made Amy's heart swell. People were truly connecting with her story, and that of so many patients who'd fought to reclaim their lives. Midway through, a middle-aged woman approached Amy with tears in her eyes. "I underwent a double mastectomy 2 years ago," she said softly. "Seeing these photos, I've never thought of my scars as anything but ugly reminders, but your exhibit feels like an anthem to resilience." Emotion wavered in Amy's throat. "That's exactly why I chose this subject. Scars tell stories of endurance." Connor, observing from a few steps away, felt immense pride seeing her interact with the guests. She radiated a quiet strength, transforming her own medical ordeal into a source of empathy for others. When Dr. Harrison found him by one of the refreshment tables, the surgeon clapped a hand on Connor's shoulder. "She's reaching people, Connor. This is bigger than just photography." Connor nodded, glancing across the room to where Amy now chatted with a couple, perhaps prospective donors to the foundation. "She's amazing," he said simply. In the corner of the gallery, the twins had set up a small table showcasing snapshots they'd taken throughout Amy's journey. Her hospital bed, Connor standing by her side, even a few candid shots of them all laughing at the apartment. Timothy eagerly explained to onlookers how these photos captured our real life, in contrast to the polished artistry of their mother's exhibit. People seemed charmed by the children's perspective on healing and family. As the evening wore on, the gallery swelled with conversation and connections. Isabel approached the microphone for a brief toast, praising Amy's bravery and the exhibit's powerful message. The applause that followed was soft yet heartfelt, echoing in the open space. Surrounded by well-wishers, Amy found Connor's hand and squeezed it. "Thank you," she mouthed over the crowd's noise. He smiled in return, touched by the success unfolding around them. This exhibit was more than just an artistic milestone. It symbolized a renewed life for Amy, and an affirmation that scars, once taboo reminders of pain, could be revered as sacred markers of survival. After the crowd began to thin, Connor wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Your art is saving hearts in a different way," he murmured. She leaned into him, overcome by gratitude and the sense that, at last, she'd found her true calling, illuminating the beauty in brokenness. 2 days after Amy's exhibit debut, Connor walked into the Foster apartment, noticing the distinct smell of freshly baked cookies. A series of papers, glue sticks, and colored pens sprawled across the coffee table. Thomas and Timothy crouched over them, whispering conspiratorially. The moment they spotted Connor, they fumbled to hide their project, shooting each other guilty smiles. "What's all this?" he asked, amused, nodding toward the partially hidden sheets of paper. Thomas grinned, trying to conceal a piece of glossy photo paper behind his back. "Oh, nothing. Just something we're working on for a school project," he said, which clearly wasn't the entire truth. Timothy, less adept at subterfuge, blurted, "It's top secret." Connor laughed softly, ruffling Timothy's hair. "All right, secret project. Got it. Where's your mum?" "She's taking a nap," Thomas said, glancing toward Amy's bedroom door. Her gallery was super busy yesterday, and she was exhausted. Connor nodded, heading to the kitchen, where he found fresh chocolate chip cookies cooling on a tray. Clearly, the boys had tried their hand at baking, a far cry from their street corner brownie venture. He picked one up and took a careful bite, wincing slightly at the crispy edges. Still, the flavor was sweet, laced with nostalgia. When Amy finally emerged, she rubbed her eyes and offered Connor a weary smile. "Sorry, I didn't realize you were here. I must have dozed off." Despite her lingering fatigue, She had a healthy glow about her, clear evidence of her ongoing recovery. "Nothing to apologize for. You've been working non-stop," he replied, moving to help her settle on the couch. "Did you get any rest?" She nodded, leaning her head back. "Yes, and it was good. So the boys have a secret project." Amy chuckled. "They've been printing photos all week, rummaging through old albums. Something about wanting to capture everyone's journeys." A sudden ring of the doorbell startled them. Connor rose to answer, discovering it was Kelly and Mrs. Jenkins carrying grocery bags. They bustled in, exchanging hellos. "We thought we'd cook a little dinner," Kelly announced. "Chicken soup, maybe some salad. Keep the energy calm tonight." As the small crew set about preparing dinner, the twins snuck away to the living room, continuing their mysterious crafting. Occasionally, Connor heard snippets, Timothy describing how he wanted a specific photo in the front, Thomas insisting on a handwritten caption. Whenever an adult poked their head in, the twins scattered the papers, protesting any attempt to peek. When dinner was ready, they all gathered around the modest kitchen table. It struck Connor how far they'd come since those uneasy early encounters. Now the table felt like a place of natural, familial harmony. Mrs. Jenkins made jokes about her questionable cooking skills. Kelly teased Connor about his persistent reliance on takeout in the past, and the twins recounted stories from school. Amy participated in the chatter with a soft glow on her face. Though her movements were still cautious, the air of worry that once surrounded her had lifted. After the meal, while the adults lingered over tea, Thomas and Timothy ran to their bedroom, returning with a thick scrapbook bound in bright fabric. They exchanged excited glances before placing it gently in Amy's lap. "What's this?" she asked, heart fluttering. "It's our family album," Timothy announced, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "We collected photos from the day Connor found us on the sidewalk, all the hospital stuff, and the good times back home." Thomas pointed to the cover, where they had scrawled, "Our journey in colorful letters. It's for all of us, Mom, but especially for you and Connor." Carefully, Amy opened the first page, revealing an image of the twins with their brownie sign. Her eyes misted. She turned the pages slowly, pictures of Connor looking hesitant in his expensive suit beside that folding table, snapshots from the hospital waiting room, where everyone's faces were lined with anxiety, a candid shot of Connor helping Thomas with homework at the kitchen table, and an entire spread of Amy's surgery day, complete with heartfelt notes the boys had scribbled about how scared they were, but how brave she'd been. "Oh my goodness," Amy murmured, voice quivering. Connor leaned in to see, both of them simultaneously laughing and tearing up at the raw honesty displayed. Near the end, there were photos from Amy's gallery opening, capturing the glow in her cheeks as she stood among her photographs. Each page held a story, a chapter of healing and connection. On the final page, a drawing by Timothy showed a simple family portrait. Amy in the center, the twins on either side, and Connor standing behind them, one arm around each boy's shoulder. Below it, Thomas had painstakingly written, "We love you both. Thanks for saving our family and making it bigger." Amy pressed a hand to her mouth, overcome by emotion. Connor's voice caught in his throat. No one in the room spoke for a moment. They just basked in the power of the images and words. The boys beamed, satisfied that their secret project had landed right where they intended, straight into everyone's heart. A full year had passed since the day Connor Pearson first stepped out of his luxury Bentley and encountered two determined boys selling brownies on a crowded Manhattan sidewalk. Now, on a mild spring afternoon, he found himself standing in the living room of the Foster apartment, helping Thomas and Timothy arrange trays of freshly baked brownies on a small folding table. "This feels awfully familiar," Connor remarked, eyeing the sign the twins had recreated. brownies for celebration. But unlike the original, this sign was bright with balloons and confetti drawn in colorful markers. The message wasn't one of desperation, it was one of gratitude and joy. Amy Foster moved around the room, adjusting decorations. Though her chest still bore subtle scars from the surgery, she had regained much of her strength. Her long brown hair fell in loose waves, and a peaceful glow shone on her face. Today's gathering wasn't just a random party, it marked a year of transformation for all of them. Guests began to arrive, neighbors like Mrs. Jenkins, friends like Kelly, and a few new supporters from the Foster Pearson Foundation. Even Dr. Harrison made an appearance, shaking Connor's hand warmly. The mood was convivial, filled with the clink of glasses and warm laughter. Thomas and Timothy, now 10 years old, eagerly served brownies to each visitor, announcing, "1 year ago, these brownies started it all." The story had become legend in their small circle, a testament to how a single act of compassion could spin countless lives into new directions. Once the apartment was comfortably filled, the chatter died down as Timothy tapped a spoon against a glass. We have a surprise," he announced, beckoning the crowd to gather near the kitchen. Thomas ran to retrieve a small stack of photographs and handed them to Kelly, who pinned them on a makeshift display board. Each image captured milestones from the past 12 months. Amy's first day out of the hospital, Connor signing foundation documents, the big gallery opening, and the twins beaming while helping at a Foster Pearson fundraiser. A hush fell. Amy looked at Connor, tears already glimmering in her eyes. "I can't believe how far we've come," she whispered, voice quivering with emotion. Connor, feeling his own chest tighten, cleared his throat. "It's been a journey, one that proved we're stronger together than we are alone." He stepped forward, glancing at the twins, who nodded encouragement. Then he gently took Amy's hands. "Over the past year," he began, speaking so all could hear, "I've watched these two remarkable boys fight for their mom, and I've watched this incredible woman face her health battles with more courage than anyone I've ever known. In helping you, Amy, I found parts of myself I thought I'd lost. You gave me something that all the money and business deals in the world never did: purpose, love, and a true sense of family." Amy swallowed hard, tears slipping down her cheeks as she nodded for him to continue. Connor took a small velvet box from his pocket. Gasps sounded around the room. He opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Amy Foster," he said, voice unsteady with emotion, "I'm not just here to celebrate 1 year of miracles. I want to promise you a lifetime of them. Will you marry me, and will you let me be the dad these boys deserve in every sense of the word?" A hush of astonishment rippled through the gathering. Thomas and Timothy stared wide-eyed, each boy gripping the other's arm in excitement. Amy's breath caught, her eyes brimming with tears. She gave a trembling smile and whispered, "Yes, 1,000,000 times, yes." Cheers erupted. Mrs. Jenkins dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Kelly clapped her hands over her mouth in disbelief, and Dr. Harrison looked on with a fond expression. Thomas and Timothy flung themselves at Connor and Amy in a tangle of laughter and tears. In the midst of the uproar, the brownies on the table suddenly took on new significance. They weren't just treats, they were symbols of a promise, a reminder that one simple act of kindness could reshape destinies. Connor slid the ring onto Amy's finger, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Outside, the New York skyline glimmered in the late afternoon light, cars honked in the distance, and pedestrians bustled on the sidewalks below. But inside the Foster apartment, time seemed to pause, capturing that singular moment of unbridled joy. Connor pulled Amy close, her hand trembling in his. Together, they looked at the twins, who were already brainstorming ways to celebrate. Every choice, every struggle, every heartbreak had led them here, to a home rich in love, trust, and a faith that good people, united in compassion, could forge bonds stronger than any hardship. And so began the next chapter of their lives, bound by brownies, promises, and a devotion they never could have predicted 1 year before. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.